Well, and this afternoon we are talking housing. It's high on the demand, but affordability actually remains a key challenge. This week, the Ghana Real Estate Developers Association has been mounting pressure on government, demanding a raft of policy measures that will ease the cost in the building industry. The appeal actually follows President Akufo-Addo's concerns over the high cost of housing here in Ghana, especially as it warns that the development, if not checked, may hamper plans to actually reduce a huge housing deficit in this country. And we need to, of course, break all of the figures down for you so you have a perfect understanding of what the population and housing census is saying about the status of our housing deficit. So as we speak now, first of all, you need to get this. Here is the outlook of Ghana's housing situation. About 20% of the structures that we have across the country that are housing many across this country are either metal containers, wooden, or they are kiosks. Whatever, I mean, you are looking out for, 20% of that number will obviously be in these three categories. But what's striking about this is that we need to bring you some more breakdown. We also need to look at how the trend has been moving just within the space of 10 years. So within the last 10 years, there's been a significant hike in the deficit. The deficit as at 2010 was at 1.7 million. But what's striking is that it shot up just within the space of 10 years by some 2 million. So you have 1.79 as of 2020. And that's what you have on your screens right now. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, the story actually is staggering when you look at the 2021 picture, which you have right here, 8.3 million. That's where we are now in terms of the housing deficit. So you have the trend moving right from 1960s, where it was somewhere around 1.5. Began to move marginally by 1.8. We are somewhere around 2.5 in 1984. And just between 1984 and 2010, you have a significant hike to 3.7. But what we have now, in terms of the increase in households, is that the households are moving somewhere into 8.3 million. So the housing as of now stands at 8.3 million in terms of structures across the country. So the figures, official figures we're having and getting from the national population census is indicating that that's the total number of the houses. But we need to tell you about the breakdown, what you need to know about the structure type, the type of housing, and what's it's all constituted. The breakdown is given right here. You have metal structures constituting some 8%, and then when it comes to wooden structures and structures that are housing people in terms of from ground up being wood made up of wood, you have 9.7%. But then 78.7% of the total 8.3 million houses that we just pointed out to you previously, you have the conventional brick and mortar making up that particular facility. So it's quite sufficient to say at this point that if you're talking about the 8.3 million houses that we're talking about, 78.7 of them will constitute the average brick and mortar. But then the breakdown, the nuances are here, 2.8 in terms of those that are kiosks. So about 2.8% of the 8.3 million will constitute that. You have 9.7 made up of I mean, some wooden structures, and then the others, the containers and others, are in the minority of some 0.9%. But the story is not ended there. If you want to do a regional breakdown to see what the trend is across the country, then you get a clearer picture of where all of this problem is coming from. And obviously, you can see right here, the Greater Accra region. That's where a significant portion of the challenges we're talking about in terms of the housing deficit is. And you can see the picture right here, 140,642. That's the number of kiosk structures that you actually have here in the Greater Accra region. You see other regions here below. In fact, the numbers are very significantly low when you come to the Upper West and the Upper East regions. But when you talk about the Greater Accra region, it's topping all of the other regions. There's a staggering difference, and you can see that right here, that it's shot up to 140,000. Then you have the Ashanti region follow through with some 31,855. But then, in terms of the metal structures as well, the Greater Accra region is leading again, which paints yet another picture that there's mounting pressure in this part of the country on affordable housing, and the need and the drive for more and more people who are living in the urban area to find some shelter. So that's why you have a significant portion of the housing structures that we have, some 287,680 of them being made up of metal containers. And you can tell that if you look at the situation in which some of these persons living in these structures are, it's nothing to write home about. The Ashanti region has a fair share of that number as well, 170,383. That's the breakdown in terms of the metallic containers, people living within these structures. That's not all. There's also the distribution for wooden structures as well. Look at it here. Greater Accra having quite a significant amount of the share, but then here in this case the Ashanti region is also competing with the Greater Accra region. So it tells you that if you look at the trend of urbanization right in the Greater Accra region and then the Ashanti region, you're likely to predict what will happen, and then you have the Eastern region following through. And this may also be due to the availability of that particular raw material, which is wood, which you'll be able to find in abundance within the Ashanti region. So 178,218 is the number for the Greater Accra region leading, and then you have the Ashanti region following through. So that's the breakdown of the 8.3 million structures that we're talking about here. But what's the level of completion for all of these structures? If you take a look at it critically, there's that clear indication that majority of the facilities and the structures that were identified under the census, 80% of them are fully completed structures, but then you have some 10% not being complete structures, and then the 7.70 are structures that are worse off, because if you're looking for shelter, your expectation is that at least the shelter will cover you. But in this case, this shelter right here, 7.70%, they are actually without any covering. So that's the picture that we have here, and the president has been very much concerned about this in his engagement with the road contractors and the real estate developers. He has made a clarion call on the real estate sector to try and address this matter collectively. There's a response from GREDA as well this afternoon on the polls, and we are fortunate to first of all hear from the president, and then we'll have a discussion on this. So let's listen to the president make the demand and a passionate appeal to private sector to deal with the concerns.
In the review of the mortgage law is something which is so critical to the growth of our real estate industry, and it's already a matter of serious discussion and priority amongst them. In all of this, I think the one thing that was raised, which has not been discussed very much, but which we cannot run away from. If we are going to be able to deal with the infrastructure deficit in our country, apart from roads, we have the deficit in our housing. Say this is a stock of what, 2 million units? 1.8 million units of housing that we need. A critical aspect of it is our ability to build houses cheaply. We cannot continue to ignore the expensive methods of construction that has made housing here virtually a monopoly of the rich. It shouldn't be the case. The richest country in the world, America, has some of the cheapest housing that you can come across anywhere in the world. We are here in Ghana, in some small three-bedroom house in East Legon. Places is costing you $350,000, $400,000, $500,000. You get mansions for that in many parts of America. Yes, $100,000, $200,000 maximum. That gives you a very well-appointed home, because the materials that go into construction in the United States are local, they're indigenous, and they are very, very cheap. We need to find a solution to how we can build strong houses here but cheaply. And I think that that is something that we all have to put our heads around and find a solution to it, so that we can then address the housing matters. The development that is taking place in our country is so rapid. If we don't take care, we wake up one day and we find our big cities nothing but huge slums, with all of the implications that has for social and stability. We'll have ourselves to blame. And we can only avoid that if we can find a way of building homes cheaply, so that most people who earn a reasonable amount of money, income, can afford to be able to get houses for themselves. So, Mr. Senior Policy Advisor, all these important matters you're put on the table, for me, the cost of construction is one of the most significant, and the ones that I think that we should all find a way to address.
And obviously that's a concerned precedent out there, but the president for the Ghana Real Estate Developers, the executive secretary, Samuel Amagaibo, is joining us now to have a comprehensive conversation on this matter. So Sami, I'm sure that you've seen the figures for yourself, and it's quite staggering, particularly when you look at the demand here in the Greater Accra region. You say that there's a need for government intervention to deal with the housing deficit. How so?
Thank you for the opportunity, and the president's call, I think it is on point, except to say that this is not the first time that such a call has been made. The private sector, GREDA, have on several occasions knocked on the doors of government to dialogue on some of these issues, but unfortunately, the response from the side of government has not been that favorable. I guess this is not a blame game situation that we find ourselves. We take the president's call as a renewed call to engage all the stakeholders to put our hands on deck and bring some solution to this problem.
Right. When you talk about policy, and when you talk about policy, I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering what exactly, in the exact terms, what's the demand of GREDA?
Yeah, with regard to policy, we are saying that there are certain local materials that private people and individuals have tried to bring onto the market, but sometimes the acceptance by Ghanaians of some of these products on the market has not been forthcoming. And so we need government to bring in some policies to encourage government itself to use some of these materials to bring the awareness of the availability of these materials, so that acceptance will be much easier, and not to place that burden on the business person alone. And I give an example to when our BRI and some private organizations came out with the Pozzolana cement. This Pozzolana cement has some very important properties that is very good for our buildings. But what has happened to this factory? It has collapsed because of lack of patronage. And yet government is the biggest spender when it comes to construction. So all we are saying is that, can government give policy directive for MMDAs and all those who build for the state to use some percentage of some of these local materials that have been identified, so that the rest of us will follow. If government is building houses for police, or building houses for doctors or nurses and teachers, these are some of the opportunities where some of these local materials should be accepted.
So I get it. Your concern is about the components, but the president says actually, if you look at the markets itself and how it's behaving, the real estate sector is becoming the preserve of the rich and elite. So it appears that you're excluding quite a significant number of persons from assessing facilities. And I'll give you a perfect example. He talks about East Legon, for instance, some $350,000 for 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments. That's a big challenge for an average Ghanaian, isn't it?
Yes, you see, but there's some dynamics in real estate that everybody must understand. If you go to every country, countries have their Manhattans. And in Ghana, East Legon, cantonments, Labone, and airport are preserved of the elite and those who have the money. So if we want to develop houses that will fit everybody, we have to create the market for it. And the comparison that the president did, it's good for me, because if you go to America to borrow money to build houses as a real estate developer, the maximum interest rate you be paying will be about 3%.
Are you not oversimplifying the matters?
In Ghana, I'm not simplifying it, but this is the environment in which we find ourselves. I borrow on the local dollar, local currency for around 24%, and borrow on the dollar around 13%. You cannot compare my environment with America. The American goes to a site that services have been provided. Water, electricity have been sent to the site. How many real estate developer sites have you seen water, electricity sent in advance by government? It has to be borne by the real estate developer. Even land ownership, which is the basic thing every real estate developer must have, has to pay 2-3 owners before you own it, because we have a very terrible land tenure system. Some work is being done in some of these areas, and we encourage government to speed it up. But the comparison doesn't work. Even tax or some of the building component that a real estate developer will use in Ghana. Remember, we are over-reliant on foreign imports. 70-30, average around 70-30 importation as against local. So if an American is building his house in America and he's buying tiles at a price, I, a Ghanaian, will go and buy those tiles at the same price that American is building. I bring it to Ghana, and government is at the door charging me importation duties on the cost. How can I be competitive just as the person in America? So the environment is not the same. Our environment where we find ourselves is a bit harsh. And in fact, we need to give thumbs up to real estate developers who are still surviving and still producing and selling houses. All we have to do is that we accept it's not a call in futility. We accept that something can be done if we all put our hands on deck. And it is interesting to note that the chamber that visited the president have the constituent of all the important stakeholders in the construction sector. And so we'll take this call up, but we'll expect government to be committed to each part of the bargain to encourage local and private businesses to embrace local material acceptance into our product, and also empower local industries to produce on economic of scale. Right now, if you want a typical building material like bricks, bamboo doors, and certain components of the building the construction, you can't even find them in the quantities that some of us can accept to use. You find companies in their own small corner trying to develop and build or put some of these materials in the market, struggling to supply. So we need to build our local industries to take this thing up and feed us with what we need. And then also, let's take advantage. We have BRRI. I keep saying it. Building and Road Research Institute. Go and find out. They may have done several. Researches that are lying on the desk that is not being used.
I get the part about the affordable. Right. We'll come into the aspect
at the level where government has engaged the BRRI to interact.
And Sami, just indulge me on this one. Just indulge me on this one. We'll talk about the research aspect, but you were talking about the cost build-up and the aspect of the materials being used even in production. We have on your screens now, and you can see the breakdown of the components that we have from the population and housing census, and I'm sure that you can see that for yourself. 78.7% is going in for the conventional materials, the brick and mortar as we speak. Then you have metal being somewhere around 8.0%. But then when you talk about the wooden structures, it's 9.7%. So looking at this particular mix that we have, which of the areas do we need to shift to, knowing that at least 78% already is dependent on the conventional aspect? So the non-conventional ones that we have, the metal, you have the wooden aspects, you have the kiosk and others. Where should we be moving towards as developers?
All the materials you've listed there, both metal, wood. I don't know about the kiosks. What you mean by kiosks? The one that the slums that are being developed in the slums, or using wooden materials instead to. Come again?
Yes, I'm saying that's the effect of it. We're talking about squatters and persons who are using these kind of structures.
I think we can look at all of them. Wooden, I'm not sure about the metal. Ghanaians' acceptance of metal, and I'm not even too sure whether at this moment metal is the best way to go, because the COVID has brought some, untold burden on us when it comes to metal. And so cost of steel and metal products are extremely high now. So I'm not sure it will become competitively cheaper. But we can look at bricks, wooden. Now, look at Anroga. You know, Kumasi, where they call Anroga.
Right.
Look at the number of carpenters who are there cutting pieces of wood, and they have a problem of disposing the waste material. Go to the advanced countries. It is sawdust that is produced into chipboards that are used for construction. But we are struggling to dispose of sawdust. So these are some of the things that we need government to assist local industries to pick these things and develop them into products that can be used for our construction. But we are struggling and nobody cares. If you come in and you want to establish a little company to run a little business, you know the difficulties. I'm not the one to bring it to your notice right now.
But are you not holding brief for some companies actually who charge exorbitant amounts just for a little piece of a building? I mean, you know what I'm talking about. There are several complaints, I'm sure, that's come to your notice about this.
Yes, I think I will agree with you to some extent that definitely there are some prices that are sometimes beyond myself. I sit in my office and I get to do certain prices of certain properties, and I think it is a bit on the high side.
Right.
But the environment in which we work in is the major issue for us. That it is not too conducive for us to develop and supply affordable houses the way we want to. That is why you don't find we, the private developers ourselves, initiating and fully developing affordable, because we cannot meet it, no matter how hard we try. After paying landowners 3 times, borrowing at those exorbitant interest rates, and then providing basic infrastructure and all that, it just prices us out. So if government wants us to partner, please, let's take this thing up together. It's not a blame game situation right now. The private sector is willing, the chamber is willing, GREDA is willing. Government should also be committed to it. It is not about the talk only. Let us be committed to the effort to bring the prices of building materials down for the common interest and mutual interest of all of the parties.
And Sami, we need to be actually wrapping up on this conversation, but one issue that we cannot run away from would obviously be about the dollarization of the structures. You are complaining as GREDA about how the exchange rate appears to be affecting business for you. But then here in the country as well, you see a lot of the real estate developers pricing and doing quite a lot of business in a foreign currency. That could be posing some adverse challenges to the economy. You agree?
Yes, I agree. And as you know, Bank of Ghana has a law on how to, price your property. So what we do is to index the price to the dollar, and it is for a good reason. If I start a typical housing project by the beginning of this year and I'm buying cement at 20 Ghana cedis a bag, I will finish the same project at the end of the year and buying cement at 42 cedis. So how do I deal with the issue of the fluctuation and the inflation in between my projects? So we only do this to safeguard us against inflation issues. And so it is not deliberate. I don't think any real estate developer today will actually price and will want to take dollar from the buyer unless the buyer is willing to pay. But we index our prices to the dollar so that we can manage our inflation and price fluctuations in between the time of our project.
And we're hard pressed for time, but one more thorny issue has got to do with government's approach. We've seen a direct intervention of government to deal with the deficit by building structures. The Saglemi facility has been under contention for some time. What's the policy measure or proposal from GREDA looking at the deadlock that we're having over that facility?
This is a very dicey one. I think currently it's more about, I don't know what the ministry keep telling us that they are investigating At a point, we heard that the matter is going to court. We don't know what is happening to it, but I think some effort has to be made to at least complete those that have been put up for the use. I mean, we are running it down. When properties are not occupied, you rather find it deteriorating much faster than it is. I think government should take it up. The cost has already been incurred. There's just a little top up to finish it. And I just want to draw your attention that this is another government project that has been executed. I wish we can find out what is the local component of that project also. So that government should also desist from initiating projects in foreign 100% or high percentage of foreign component into projects like this. Let us locally hatch these projects. The BNR is there, GREDA is there, in Ghana Institute of Architects, Ghana Institute of Surveyors, all these groups are there. If you put us together, I'm very sure we will be able to hatch a project and sustain that project to its logical conclusion for it to be used. Instead of having projects of this that end up becoming controversial and giving us problems instead of solving our problems for us.
Samuel Amegaibo, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up the conversation here. He's the Executive Secretary for GREDA.